Just driving out in my backyard. Found some interesting things in one of John Twetness's books on the Book of Mormon that I want to share with you. So I thought I'd just come out in my backyard so I can meditate and think and read and share some ideas with you. It's on the prophecies of Jeremiah concerning Jesus Christ. Now, the Book of Mormon specifically links this theme of Jeremiah prophesying about Jesus Christ, but critics have said that Jesus Christ wasn't known to the Old Testament prophets. The criticism is too early, and yet the Book of Mormon correctly identifies that Jeremiah did prophesy about Jesus Christ. There's some early Christian interpretations of this that I want to share with you that I think are very, very instructive. And of course, John Twetness, with his outstanding caliber of scholarship on the Book of Mormon, correctly notes these interesting themes. So I'm going to share some ideas on the prophecies of Jesus Christ out of Jeremiah as the Book of Mormon correctly depicted. Once again, a supposed problem of the Book of Mormon has been discovered to not be a problem at all, but to actually be a pretty good correct idea and a correct theme. Now, this is out of John Twetness's book, The Most Correct Book. This was published by Cornerstone back in 1999, 10 years ago. The Most Correct Book by John A. Twetness. Notes in chapter 11. He's quoting the Book of Mormon. Now I would that you should know that ever since the days of Abraham, so this is going way back now, he's quoting the Book of Mormon here. Since the days of Abraham there have been many prophets that have testified of these things. Yea, behold, the prophet Zenos did testify boldly, for which he was slain. Behold also Zenock, and also Esaias, and also Isaiah, and Jeremiah. Jeremiah being that same prophet who testified of the destruction of Jerusalem. So he's specifically showing that this is our biblical Jeremiah. We have his records in the Old Testament. And now we know that Jerusalem was destroyed according to the words of Jeremiah. Oh, then why not the Son of Man come according to his prophecy? This is Helaman 8, 19, and 20. The declaration in this Book of Mormon passage suggests that several ancient prophets, including Jeremiah in the Bible, knew and prophesied of the coming of Christ. Now, it's interesting because there are no specific prophecies of Christ in the biblical book of Jeremiah, so far as scholarship is aware of. To be sure, Jeremiah chapter 31, verses 31 through 34, they speak of a new covenant that's supposed to be established. But it does not mention Christ as such, who brought that new covenant. So the question becomes, how then do we explain Nephi's statement to the people of the city of Zarahemla that Jeremiah had prophesied of Christ? Some new interesting developments in biblical scholarship and literature shows us, as we compare the Hebrew and the Greek versions of the Old Testament and compare it with how this was interpreted in early Christianity, that this is an extremely plausible concept. And I think this is fascinating, because the Book of Mormon said this way back in the 1830s. This is when we began to understand Jeremiah did have prophecies about Christ. Now this has come out a little bit more. What biblical scholarship understands about the Hebrew aspects of the book of Jeremiah is that it is an extremely complex work. Many of the prophecies bear the dates expressed in the terms of the year of the reigning monarch. This is one of the ways that the biblical record keeps track of its chronology. They don't appear in chronological order in Jeremiah, however. Jeremiah is, after all, it's not an historical book, but a collection of prophecies with an interspersing of personal recollections by the prophet himself. It says this on page 100 of his book. The earliest portions of Jeremiah are actually chapters 26 and 27. Isn't that interesting? The chronology is way off here. This is basically a pastiche. It's a record that has been compiled by someone else. actually probably by Baruch, his scribe. He says, these were written at the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, and chapter 35 was written while Jehoiakim was yet king. Chapter 25 is next, being dated to the first year of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, and is closely followed by chapters 36, 45, and 46, and so it goes on and on. The chronology is fascinating. If we read it in that respect, we'll see that. The lack of chronological order in the book of Jeremiah of the various revelations, this suggests that the book of Jeremiah is a later collection of separate documents, to which a preface, that is Jeremiah chapter 1, this was added to this collection. Because it was not written as a single book, it is possible that some of Jeremiah's writings never made it into the book of Jeremiah. And so this really gets interesting when we now understand the Hebrew aspects of it as not being very chronological. Now when we explore the Greek, we get something even more interesting. Now this gets interesting because it wasn't until the 3rd and 2nd century BC that the books of the Old Testament were translated into the Greek. And of course this was for the convenience of the Jews in the communities in Egypt, in Alexandria. And this is of course the Greek Septuagint. Now, the version of Jeremiah has the chapters in different order in the Greek than they do in the Hebrew version of Jeremiah. And ironically, the Greek of Jeremiah is an eighth shorter than the Hebrew. It lacks a translation of some 2,700 words. So this gets kind of interesting too, because what's happening now, we're told, is our modern English is based on the Hebrew, so we have a longer version. And we have the same chapter order as the Hebrew version, as opposed to the Greek. The Septuagint version of Jeremiah makes up for the missing portions by including 2 items that are not found in our Hebrew. So the Greek is an important witness here to something interesting going on about Jeremiah. These are the writings of Baruch, that was Jeremiah's scribe, and we learn this in Jeremiah 36 verse 4, and a letter that has been attributed to Jeremiah himself. Later versions of the Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate in the Bibles separated these 2 portions off from the main portion of Jeremiah, and they became part of the Apocrypha. But originally, they were in the Scripture, in the Greek. That's interesting. So don't discount the Apocrypha just because, technically speaking, it's apocryphal. Now, Apocrypha, of course, means so sacred that it was hidden from normal eyes. Later on, it acquired the meaning of being dubious books, but that's not the original meaning of Apocrypha. We have to remember something. The very idea of canon, Apocrypha, pseudepigrapha, so on and so forth, that's our modern convenient ways of itemizing groups of sacred writings. None of this system that we have today was had anciently. None of it. So we have to be careful about distinguishing what's what and what is where. This separate portion, these books, their canonicity had been questioned because they had been included in the Apocrypha from a later age. In the Greek Septuagint, they were not questionable books. They were part of earlier editions of the King James Bible, and of course the Apocrypha are still included in the Catholic canon. So with this idea in mind, he then looks at the writings of Jeremiah that testify about Jesus Christ. And this is so interesting in relation to the Book of Mormon teaching. And what have the ancient records of antiquity brought out? 6 copies of the book of Jeremiah were also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, along with a copy of the Epistle of Jeremiah in the Greek. One of the Jeremiah scrolls has a Hebrew version. Now, this Hebrew version is interesting because it follows the shorter Greek version and not the Hebrew Bible. This is very important to realize. The Dead Sea Scrolls also include fragments of 2 texts about Jeremiah that are not found in our Bible.